All right, we're going to move on to now reports by board members. As I said a moment ago, that Linda has done an amazing job. So has Chris Blessing. We've worked together, but you have done a lot of homework here and put an amazing slideshow together for the community. We have told you that we want to be transparent with you, and this is now going to begin the starting of that new relationship between the Western Hills Water District and the community. We are going to start with a presentation tonight that Chris has worked hours and hours on. It's been ran through not only myself, but David Hobbs. We've gone back and forth, and we've been able to get everything solidified. And Chris has this awesome presentation to present to the community. And I'm just saying, take it away, Chris. Once we get through the whole thing, we're going to open up for comments or questions regarding the presentation only. And again, it will be 1-minute comments or questions, and we will be able to field a lot of those answers. If not, we'll let you know that we'll get back to you on the answers. All right, Chris, take it away.
Thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate the compliments. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Great.
You're good.
If Ashley, if you don't mind keeping an eye out for people raising their hand, if they can't see the presentation, I want to address that.
Sure.
Make sure they can.
But we're not gonna stop and answer questions.
Not for questions, right? Right.
So people, folks, if you have questions as the presentation's going through, kind of jot them down on a piece of paper, and then at the end, you can ask questions.
Yes. All right, let me take a deep breath. This isn't going to be terribly long, but it is full of information, and I just hope that the community can, walk along with me here and digest this information. We will, like Matt said, we'll get to some Q&A at the end. I've also taken the liberty of writing up a few preemptive questions that you might have towards the end of the presentation, so we'll walk through that. And at the very end of the presentation, which, by the way, this presentation will be made public on the website, you'll find links to all the reference documents, and you'll also find my email address where you can contact me if you have any questions. I have no problems with that. So let's get started. How did we get to the point where we are now? I'm sure a lot of you already know this history, but for those who don't, in particular me, I just moved here in 2017, a relatively short time ago. I didn't know most of this information until basically last year. So the original and current standing Kern Water County Agency, KWCA agreement was established in June of 2000. That was done in partnership with DG, LP, the original developers here. They went bankrupt in 2008. World International purchased Diablo Grande, all villages, if I'm not mistaken, 1 through 5, in 2009. Then in April 2020, as most of you know by now, Angels Crossing was transferred that property from World International. The original master plan, if you don't know, called for 5,000 homes up here, along with a lot of other things like more golf courses and hotel and shopping and all kinds of good stuff. Village 1, Oak Flat, that's where we live now. That was slated for 2,000 homes in totality, with the other 3,000 going to the other villages that remain to this day undeveloped agricultural land effectively. As of 2021, only 600 homes have been built, including those new homes that went in a couple of years ago, you may recall. The water district is extremely underfunded because of this lack of development. As you can imagine, the costs borne to us ratepayers were speculatively put in place because they anticipated more development. They anticipated the full build out, and it just never happened. So that's how we've gotten to the point where we are today, where we're just extremely underfunded, and we'll get into that in a minute. oops, got ahead of myself there. So originally, as part of the approval process for the Diablo Grande Master Plan, Stanislaus required that the project have a source water equal to 8,000 acre feet to meet that demand of 5,000 homes, several golf courses, a hotel, et cetera, et cetera. Initially in 2001, that plan began at 1,200 acre feet, sort of in a cadence with building out the community. As you can imagine, that's not just going to happen in 1 year. So they planned to scale up the acre feet allotment, and I believe thus the bill due from the water district to KWCA to the 8,000 final acre feet in 2013. And you can see here from the original water schedule that is part of the KCWA Diablo Grande water agreement, which you can read, that's how it was. From 2001 to 2012, it was less than 8,000. And then from 2013 to 2035, it's 8,000. Makes sense for, you know, a couple thousand homes at least, right? Now, a lot of you might not know what SWP is, but that's the state water project. They are the gods of water in the state of California. And they're the ones who set the allocation percentage for exactly how much water you get, even though you may be paying for a lot more, because water, as you all know, is a very scarce resource. And there's simply not enough to go around sometimes, especially in a drought year. The current allocation is set at 10%. That is down from the 2 revisions in 2020. They can actually set it as low as 0% if they want, if they need to. And that did happen, although it did get revised to 5%. If I remember correctly, there's 2 times per year that they revise these numbers, but I'm not sure if they can probably just revise them at any time that's needed, but don't quote me on that. Just some quick calculations. You know, if we're at 5%, we're getting 400 acre feet. If we're at 10%, we're getting 800 acre feet. 400 is less than we currently use with 600 homes, and would require some water saving measures that we would all have to participate in. And if we do dip below allocation wise what we actually need to consume, then we end up buying banked water at a much higher cost, which I don't actually have the cost numbers on, but as I know, that happened in 2014. And as you can imagine, our district doesn't need higher costs for anything right now. So let's get into some nitty gritty about how this district's been mismanaged. In 2019, due to World's inability or refusal, if you want to call it that, to further develop Diablo Grande, World indicated they would no longer continue to subsidize the Western Hills Water District operations. What that means is the developer decided no longer to adhere to the master agreement between the water district and the developer themselves. World ceased making payments for golf course water and is or was currently delinquent in the amount of approximately $515,000 as of April 2020. April 2020 is significant for another reason. Angels Crossing acquired Diablo Grande from World, and AC signed the AAR, the Assignment, Assumption, and Release Agreement, and agreed to fund the subsidy moving forward, and also agreed that they would pay World's delinquent water bill of the $515,000 aforementioned. Also, the delinquent amounts to Kern County and the city of Patterson. The Kern County water bill stands as of 1/1/2021 at $2.9 million, give or take. And the delinquent Melrose obligations, which we don't have a current number for, but as of April 2020, per the AAR, it's right around 8.7 million. AC also racked up a water bill of nearly 400,000, and that's in addition to the 515,000 before the water was shut off to the golf course. That gets to my next point. Late 2020, golf course water was shut off by the water district due to non-payment. This is a copy of the promissory, if you want to call it that, letter from Angels Crossing, signed by Don Hale Jr., stating as much that, let's see if I can pick a quote out here. The first step in this effort is to express our full intent to remedy any and all outstanding liabilities. That's the third paragraph. I don't really have anything else to say about it. It's available for your reading pleasure.
I want to jump in right there. They also state that they will start making payments within 30 days. That's a very important statement in this. It's in paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. It says, with the input of the Western Hills Water District, it is our plan to first educate our group on the current status of the community, then strategizing how to best meet its needs. We plan to introduce next steps within the first business week of possession, with an intent to begin setting past financial liabilities within the first 30 days. And we are here around, what, 9 or 10 months now, and we have not received any money.
That's correct. Only legal challenge. All right. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Feel free to chime in. You have more history on this than I do. The AAR, which I mentioned before, the Assignment, Assumption, and Release Agreement, the Western Hills Water District Board ratified the assignment of the Master Agreement obligations, also available at the end of this presentation, from World to Angels Crossing at its April 24th, 2020 meeting. Those minutes from that meeting are available, and the agenda are available on the website. Guillermo was directed to sign as president after the board approved, of course. Requests and demands from the district to Angels Crossing for their financials and abilities to fund were rejected. That's just a fact. This is a copy of the AAR. Again, it'll be available for you on the website and or at the end of this presentation. I'll just quickly go over some of these bullet points. Here's the 500 in bullet point C. Hopefully everyone can read this. I know it's kind of small. Bullet point C lays out the $515,601 in past due water charges. Bullet point E lays out the 8.7 million plus in Melrose obligations. And further on down the line here in bullet point G, if you get through to the third sentence, the funding obligations of 1.13 million. The numbers are high, obviously, and I should add that this is in effect as of April 30th, 2020. To date, my knowledge, and Matt, you can correct me on this, is that none of this has been taken care of.
None of it.
Very good. So what's our current financial status? Well, I'm going to hand that over to our new treasurer, and a man I have great faith in, Mr. Mark Kovich, to speak on that. And temporarily, I'm just going to take the presentation away so that he can speak on it.
Don't you put the graph up? Why doesn't he talk over the graph?
All right, that's fine.
Yeah, you don't have to hand it over to me, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Just
Here's your graph.
Yep, I'll explain this to the public. Before I explain this graph, there's something I'd like to mention to people on the call that we hadn't discussed yet, and I find it very perplexing that, you know, Angels Crossings were talking to World for quite a long time regarding this whole agreement, and that there was ample time for them to do due diligence on the water district. And I think that just needs to be on the record. So just, you know, keep that in consideration. So anyways,
Absolutely.
what I've done so far, folks, I've been at the district office a lot, reviewing the numbers, what's occurred. I'm doing a full financial audit to make sure that everything is clean and we understand what's really transpired. And what I want to show you folks here is that this is a graph starting back from the beginning when World International had taken over Diablo Grande and was, you know, running the water district from the get-go. And to World's credit, and I think we need to acknowledge that they have done a lot in the past as far as keeping the water district, you know, going and afloat. And what this graph represents are contributions for every half of the year since they came into the picture, showing subsidy and water charges that were paid for basically water going onto the course. And you can see it's a lot of money. It's totaling over $21 million in a 10-year period. That's not chump change. And the thing that, if you notice towards the latter half of the graph, starting in the second half of 2019, how the financing and the money that was coming into the water district has really fallen off. In fact, you can see it, second half of 2018, first half of 2019, second half of 2019, it's just falling off and then disappearing altogether for a full year. And we're going into another half year here with virtually no subsidy or payment of water charges whatsoever, even though the water's been turned off to the golf course. And so it's quite apparent that without this additional funding to help our water district, we're in a very dire financial situation, and that some hard decisions are going to have to be made by us community members as far as what we want to do going forward. It's apparent that, they're not paying the bills, and that can't be stressed enough. And I think people need to see this graph and understand the contributions that were made by World. I know that in the past, a lot of us had our complaints or comments about World International, but again, to their credit, they did do a lot as far as, keeping that our water district alive for all these years. And the reasons why they've stopped is still perplexing to me. And the reasons why Angels Crossing has come in and acquired this development and still refused to pay based on a contractual agreement is still perplexing to me, and along with others. So that's basically it in a nutshell. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer that at the end of the presentation. So, Chris.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks,
Great,
Mark.
great summary. Okay, so how can we rectify this problem? Well, I should note that the community is going to have to come together here to rectify this. This is not going to happen just because board members make a certain decision or we find some hidden stash of $10 million somewhere. The short answer is the water district needs to look at implementing a water rate increase for the entire community. Right now, my understanding is the water district has consultants who are working on various case scenarios around what that water rate increase could look like. We're hoping that by March, we'll have concrete numbers that we'll be able to present to you as a community. And
Can I interject something right here, Chris?
okay.
Just so the community understands, we had a water rate study that began back in, I believe it was August, and we came up with a lot of different numbers. One thing that we have realized at this juncture, giving Angels Crossing the benefit of the doubt over and over and over again, thinking that they and hoping that they would pay and fulfill their contractual obligations, what we've realized is they're not going to even pay their water bill. And they were sort of budgeted for somewhere around $700,000 a year for paying water, even though that's really low. That was kind of their number. If I remember correctly, they wanted to be budgeted somewhere around $700,000 a year. And I just, or is that a year or a month? No, a year. And I don't, that just doesn't, that in of itself was very low. But we were looking at that in the first rate study back in August when we had our ad hoc committee and everything. And what we're going to be presenting to the community, hopefully in March, I should have numbers by the end of February. We had to remove that 700,000 because we can't pretend or hope that Angels Crossing is going to even pay that with the track record they've had for 9-10 months. We just can't. So we're having to redo the rate study taking out that 700,000 that the first rate study was sort of looking at. So we're going to have some different numbers. We're waiting for those numbers. And I think March is going to be our busy month. And we're going to be communicating with the community on how that looks. But to Chris's point, the rates are going to have to go up or we're going to lose our homes. I mean, that's just a reality that the community is going to have to understand. I'm doing everything in my power to keep the amount low as I can. But the reality is the bills have to get paid. And it's a reality that the community is going to have to grapple with and come to understanding. And we are going to continue to be very transparent and open about everything. And that's why we're starting in this month with this demonstration. So with that, Chris.
Thank you very much for that detail, Matt. That's important for everyone to realize. We're not trying to be delivering bad news here, but this is reality. And like you said, if we cannot pay the bills going forward, we may not be able to have water, which is purely unsustainable for the community, as anyone can imagine. Just a couple more points on the rate increase. So the rate increase would not be for covering capital expenditures. That's things like pump repairs or infrastructure or any sort of equipment that's needed for the plants, et cetera, et cetera. That is still a TBD item. How do we do that? And the whole point of the rate increase is to get the district to basically a year over year or month to month at least solvency, where we aren't owing money on our bills going forward anymore. It's not going to solve the problem of our debts, but it will solve the problem of paying for active water usage going forward. And Matt, you can correct me on that unless that's correct.
No, that is absolutely correct.
Perfect. The big takeaway, though, the really big takeaway that I hope everyone in the community can really get behind, because it's something that this poor community has struggled with for 20 years, is not having to rely on a developer to subsidize the water district anymore. If we can break free of that shackle, then a developer who doesn't develop is no longer a problem for us. A developer who does develop is a great boon for us. And, potentially water rates get reassessed when that does happen, right? Just as a reminder, we are a nonprofit public entity here. So, we're not trying to profit off the backs of our community members. We just want to be able to pay the bills and keep the water flowing. And I know that's all I care about at this point. All I want to be sure of is that I can stay in my home and I'm going to have water coming to it and I can water my grass out back and, be a normal homeowner, right? And not have to have some catch basin in the middle of the mountains collecting all the rainwater that doesn't fall.
And to chime in on that, Chris,
Sure.
And to your point on this, which is very important for the community to understand, by raising our rates and covering the subsidy and being able to continue to move forward, we will be in a position to look better to a developer, whether that developer is World International, whether that developer is Angels Crossing, whether that developer is somebody that we don't even know in the future. We will look much better to a developer if they can come in and actually just start building and doing what they need to do. And then again, to Chris's point, it takes the stress off of whether we are worried about whether we're going to get water to our homes. And that's the biggest thing for me.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Okay, moving on. That was a long one, I know. I hope everyone's still with us. So, what can we do about World and AC not performing to date? We're going to have to keep this pretty high level, as hopefully most of you can imagine and accept. But basically, any legal avenue we can pursue, we will explore to its fullest possible extent.
And we already are.
Sorry?
And we already are. And we already are.
And of course, that's already begun, yes. But continuing forward, anything else that we can figure out that we can go after, we will. There have been liens already filed on AC and World properties. I'm sure they're already aware of that. That applies to any property that they own in the county. Another very important note is that there is no bailout for Western Hills Water District here. There is no state savior. There is no agency that's going to come in and just say, oh, okay, well, we'll run it now. That's just not going to happen. It doesn't happen. So it's very important that we as a community take care of this. I know it's a burden for everyone, but
can I please interject something here? There is a lot of rumor, some created by Angels Crossing, that, oh, the state will never let the water get shut off. Oh, this and that and the other thing. I'm telling you, that is not a factual statement. Just look at Stockton when it went bankrupt. That's probably the most recent case. I mean, there could be others, but that's one that's very recent to us. When Stockton went bankrupt, they did not come in. The state did not come in and bail them out and say, you can continue to have water. That's not how it happened. They had to get a water entity to buy them out, and to, there was a lot involved in that whole process. So I'm just letting you know that there is no state bailout, no matter what comes out of the mouth of anyone from Angels Crossing or just the rumor mill. That's just not a fact. It is not a fact. And I think the community needs to understand this, that there is no savior on that point. Of course, if water were to be shut off, we would have our lawyer immediately file an injunction. That injunction would last for a short period of time while we began to figure out what we were going to do. My point is to never see that happen. I want
absolutely
to create a way to never, ever enter into that position, which would throw us all into a very bad situation.
All right, let's get to some happier news. There are actually benefits to doing this, like we've talked about already, but obviously, number one, we'll still continue to get clean drinking water, which is absolutely required. We won't see a plummet in home values because there's no more water service to this neighborhood. Again, we would not be financially dependent on our developer to subsidize the water district and keep the water flowing. Another important point, the rate increase would be adopted subject to a provision that if Western Hills Water District is successful in obtaining recovery against the delinquent parties, those funds would be used to offset rates to the extent that it is economically viable and to the best interest of ratepayers. So if we can, we will, basically, is what that says. And I mean, one can only guess what would prevent that from happening. It would only be something we would know in the future.
And let me just chime in on that. I know that one of the biggest things for us as a board that we've been, in our own understanding of how this all is working out, is if we're going to ask the community to pay the subsidy that a developer by contract is supposed to be paying, we want to make sure and ensure that the community knows that we will fight, and we will fight, and we will fight, and we will fight whatever battle needs to be fought to collect, receive judgments and collect from developers, whether it be World, Angels Crossing, or even a new developer in the future that may come in, negotiating with them to once again put money into the subsidy so we can lower rates or give back some type of a rebate to the community. We are not going to allow Angels Crossings to benefit up here if you and me and all of us are having to pay the subsidy because they're not wanting to. We are going to do whatever it takes to make sure that they're held accountable for their breach of contract and their refusal to pay what needs to be paid. So the community who are listening, you can understand and know that we are not just, let's raise rates and move forward. No, we're raising rates because we know it's a survival situation. But at the same time, we want you to know that we will use whatever measures we can Of course, when you're dealing with the law and you're dealing with courts and you're dealing with judgments and you're dealing with collection on a judgment, there's a lot of what ifs in there and there's a lot of gray areas. So I can't guarantee anything, but I can guarantee you that we are not going to let people off. We're going to go after them and with whatever measures we can. So you have, I can speak on behalf of the board on this, that we're all in agreement that we're not going to let these people get away with this without answering for it.
Absolutely, good point. And I hope everyone heard that. All right, so what are the consequences of not doing the rate increase? It's pretty simple. If Western Hills Water District cannot pay Kern County, there is a great possibility that water service will be interrupted temporarily or terminated. If Western Hills Water District is unable to provide clean drinking water to DG, property values will certainly go down and the community would not be viable to live in. Obviously, water is a requirement. The third bullet point here, the water district would never reach solvency and thus always be dependent on a developer financially. However, that might not even matter if none of us are here.
Correct.
Oh, geez. Well, I have a problem here with my contracts that I included. Unforeseen. Let me try to reload. There we go. All right, everyone can still see that?
Yep.
Great. So just to hit back on the prior bullet points about the Kern County Western Hills contract and the fact that service could be interrupted, I wanted to illustrate that, in fact, we've already had to talk to them about this, as one could imagine, and show you the contract itself. Again, this will be available at the end of the presentation and will be available on the website. This is Article 5, page 7. I'm just going to read the highlighted portion out loud. In the event of any default by Western Hills in the payment of any money required to be paid to the agency hereunder, that's KCWA, or in any other obligations under this agreement, the agency, in its discretion, may suspend delivery of water to Western Hills during the period when Western Hills is delinquent in its payment. That can't be any more clear. They can simply shut off water. That is the reality of the situation. Now, my next slide is going to show you.
Wait, go back because it's important. You got to finish this. So it's delinquent in payment for obligations, provided that, and so there's a number 1 here. The agency, which is Kern, has given Western Hills not less than 4 months prior written notice of any such default.
Well, I was going to get to that on my next slide.
Well, I know, but have them read that because this is important, that this is actually in the agreement. And now your next slide is going to explain why that's so important.
Yes. So the next slide is a letter from KCWA to Western Hills Water District, April 9, 2020. It's outlining the defaults that have already occurred in 2019 and 2020. And if you look at the dates, 2019 is quite a bit behind April 9th, as is January 2020, about 4 months. So effectively, they've provided said written notice of those defaults. Obviously, if you read this letter, which is also available at the end of the presentation, you can see there was a partial payment on July 1, 2019, but then there was 0 payment on January 2020. Let me read the paragraph here that demonstrates that they actually are aware of what's going on. Pursuant to your conversations with Lauren Bauer of my staff, that's KCWA, on January 16, 2020 and February 20, 2020, it has come to our attention that World International has not provided funding to Western Hills. Since World International is a major funding source for Western Hills financial obligations, it is our understanding that the Western Hills Board of Directors was unable to approve payment to the agency, KCWA, at its February 19th, 2020 meeting. Therefore, Western Hills is in default of payment. That's as of April 9, 2020. We are here in February 2021, excuse me. We still have running water. By all measures, they could have shut our water off in August of last year.
August 9th of last year.
Yes.
And whether it be COVID, or just the kindness and generosity, who knows? But we're living on borrowed time, and that's the seriousness of it.
That's for sure. Right. Moving along. What is our forward-looking plan? So again, a rate increase is going to need to be approved and put in place to get us to break even. We need to get to break even so we can pay forward bills. In this regard, there are pros and cons, of course. We prop ourselves up as a community, since current developer owner will not. We maintain solvency thanks to our community contributions. We don't need a developer to subsidize the district anymore, and we can be self-sustaining. That's all great stuff. I really like that. I actually really like that idea in the first place, and I'm sure that was the original vision for Diablo Grande. The cons are we don't fund ourselves for capital expenditures like I explained earlier, which means we're a little bit vulnerable if equipment failures start happening or somehow an earthquake. I don't know if we have earthquake insurance or not, but let's just say something fails. There may not be enough money in the bank to repair that. There may be some downtime or something. So we need to find a solution to that still. I'd also like to point out, and Matt, you probably can talk about this too, but California regularly releases new requirements for water districts pretty much yearly, as far to my understanding. And we have to pay to come up to speed on those things, just like you would building code if you were building a home. Or if you're installing, let's say, for example, I had to have my hot water heater installed, replaced last year. My house wasn't built to 2019 code. It was built in 2008. I didn't have a pan underneath my hot water heater. So I had to pay to add a pan and have it installed with a drain. And, you know, that's several $100s. I had to come up with that, just as the water district has to come up with that sort of stuff to stay in compliance. Meanwhile, we as a community will continue to hope that AC will perform as they're obligated. I won't say anything more on that. Now, in addition to this plan, we can do a few other things. We can explore merging with another water entity. We have no idea what that looks like. It's a possible option. We have no idea if it's possible, but it's an option. Any merger with another water entity, of course, is going to mean that we as a community still have to pay 100% of the costs of water delivery to our homes. There's no way that another district is, or another entity is going to subsidize Diablo Grande in any way. And again, this is sort of a Hail Mary last resort option, you know, if we have to come down to it. Hopefully we don't need to do this, but it's possible.
So I want to interject here a little.
Go for it.
So way back, time flies. I was asked by someone in the community if I had a plan B, and I quickly said, no, there's no plan B. Well, I laid awake thinking there's got to be a plan B. Well, I can tell you guys that there's a plan B and a plan C now that we're going to be looking into. And we should be able to bring a lot of that information to the community next month, I think after the rates, if not March, definitely April. But we are looking at a couple different things, and Chris just alluded to two of them, and that is by raising rates, we're putting ourselves in a place where we will be able to pay current bills. The only negative side is we don't have infrastructure money. So there are several things that the board will be discussing in the next several weeks where we might be able to dig ourselves out of this hole and pay off some debt and do some things. And we're working on those things right now. And then there's also this possible merger with another water entity as a last resort. So we've gone from back in November-ish, September, October-ish, from, hey, there's no plan B, Angels Crossing is the only way, to now there is some options. And we have been able to put our heads together. And I don't want people leaving this meeting thinking there's no, water's going to get shut off or something. No, there are some really good ideas and plans that all of us as board members are working on. And everybody is working every day on these issues. And so we should have more information and have a little more fleshed out ideas. But no matter what, whether it be our Western Hills Water District Plan A or our Western Hills Water District Plan B, whatever we decide to go with, no matter what, there has to be rate increases, because whether we are going to try to survive on our own or whether we're going to have to merge, either one of those, we must, as a community, be able to pay our water and sewer rates ourselves and not be solely relying on a developer. Specifically in this situation, a developer that hasn't even paid their trash bill or their TID bill. And as I made mention, we had to move the entire 911 operating system out of the clubhouse because they didn't pay their bill. So, we can't rely on them at this juncture. And so as a community, we have to start kind of turning the page and really looking at us surviving, and we as a community surviving together. And so I just encourage everyone, as you're getting this information, maybe you've already known this information, maybe it's the first time you're getting this information. I don't want you to be panic stricken, because there are options for us to move. And I'm hopeful on both options, but both options require us to raise rates. And so next month, we're going to have those numbers, I'm hoping. I really am. I'm supposed to be getting some real tangible numbers by the end of this month, and we will have that for you guys next month. So I just want you to know, because this is a lot of bad news. There's a lot of like, ugh. And I just don't want you to walk away from this meeting feeling hopeless, because I'm not feeling hopeless. I'm sitting here with kind of a stern look, because there's a lot riding on the board of directors right now, and we're all working overtime. I can tell you everybody is working constant.
Absolutely.
And nobody is not working on this board, and it's all voluntary, but we're all working, and we're working to save our homes, to save your home. And we're just asking in return that the focus doesn't necessarily, if I can just say that we can be angry with World and we can be angry with Angels Crossing, sure, reasonable. But at the same time, we have to be able to say, but what are we going to do to survive? And what are we going to do to ensure that water continues to flow, so our home values stay where they need to be at, and we can continue to function? And I am very optimistic that we can do this, but it's going to take the rate increase. And so I just ask that everybody be open to that as we move forward.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So that's pretty much the end of the informational presentation, but I did write up a few Q&As. And again, I apologize. I know it's kind of a text wall here for everyone, but I hope you can read it. I'll go ahead and read it myself. What's this about World International running the Western Hills Water District Board for years? It's an often asked question, I think, amongst the community members. The water board hasn't necessarily been paid attention to by community members as closely as of late. And so effectively, it's just been run by the developer, who had held a board majority for a long time. I'll go ahead and read the actual answer that David would probably like me to stay on script about. Western Hills Water District is what is known as a landowner voting district. Instead of one person, one vote, each landowner holds a number of votes equal to the number of dollars in assessed land values. That's land only, not the house, not the buildings, land only, as dictated by the county. For example, if the lot in which your house is located is assessed at $100,000, again, that's just the land, then you have 100,000 votes. As discussed next in question 2, because World did have a significant majority of the outstanding votes as compared to individual landowners in the district, they were able to retain a majority on the board because very few residents declared themselves candidates for elections or vacancies. That's just a matter of fact. There just hasn't been a lot of interest in the water district. I'm guilty of that. For the first almost 3 years that I lived here, I don't think I attended one water board meeting. I just thought everything was hunky-dory, just flowing along. No pun intended, everything was good. I mean, I pay my property taxes, I pay my Melrose, I pay my water bills. I figured everything was fine. Turns out it wasn't. All right, here's an even longer one. Why hasn't there been a Western Hills Water District Board of Directors election in years? In every year for which there was a director seat up for election, the Water District conducted the election process in accordance with state law, beginning in at least 2011 and every odd number year since that date. The Western Hills Water District has started the election process in accordance with the elections code. However, no elections are needed to be conducted when the number of candidates equals the same number of director positions up for election, because there's only one candidate to vote for. That person's going to get voted in no matter what. For example, if there are 2 director positions and only 2 people declare their candidacy, there is no election held. Yada, yada, yada. This occurred in 2011 and 2013 when an election actually was conducted. I'm guilty of thinking there was an election after 2013. There has not been. Recently, accusations have been made that the Western Hills Water District must hold elections when a director resigns the position prior to the date the seat is up for election. So if the seat was up in November and I resigned in April, some people were saying that there must be an election. There cannot be any other way. But actually, this is false. When a vacancy occurs prior to the expiration of the term, except for specific circumstances which haven't occurred, the board is authorized by law, and in fact our own bylaws, to either fill the vacancy by appointment, filled by a vote of the board, or call for a special election. To date, such a vacancy has always been filled by appointment with the board, as opposed to holding a special election. And there's a very good reason for that. As a landowner voting district, Western Hills Water District is required to conduct its own elections. There's no county assistance. This is a lot of work, and I'm sure Matt would be happy to explain a little bit more about it, but appointment instead of calling for an election saves the district tens of thousands of dollars for that year. So it's a very important point. It's not like we've had cash to just roll out for elections every year either. So, in a way, I think appointments have done this district both a disservice and a service in the past, in particular lately, a service. Matt, is there anything you want to add to that?
Nope, because if you want to have an election, then you have to have a developer paying the money as a subsidy to afford the election. So it's irony, I guess, that a developer wants us to have another election but doesn't want to pay for the election. They think we should pay for the election, but actually it's them that pay for it because they cover the subsidy. So if we don't have enough money to put water into your house, how in the world are we going to spend $20,000 on an election?
Exactly.
I mean, it just doesn't, it's just, the irony is ridiculous.
It doesn't escape us, no. All right, number 3. What happens to the money I pay every month to Western Hills Water District? Well, currently, based on the fact that the rates need to go up, that the money you pay every month isn't enough for the district. And we have to continue to subsidize operational costs on our own. But the short answer is customer payments are currently being used to fund operations and keep water service running. That means paying our employees, paying for whatever tests need to be done or procedures need to be accomplished in order to get treated water, in order to get raw water up and treated water down to your homes and my home. The bills that are outstanding sorry, I put KWCA, but the bills that are outstanding with KCWA and the city of Patterson are simply outstanding. Why are these bills piling up? Western Hills Water District facilities must run, and bills piling up are a symptom of an underfunded district. Plain and simple. If the district was being funded per the master agreement AAR, these bills would be paid. And as an analogy, I just put in, you know, if you're at home and you find out you get laid off, what are you going to default on first? Are you going to stop buying groceries? No, you need daily operational groceries in order to feed your family. But you might put off the mortgage payment for a few months. You may even put off other bills for a few months in order to continue to buy water and food. Those are the necessary operations that we're funding right now. Again, we choose to fund immediate operations rather than debts, which can be settled later.
And that's where the 50,000 you see us every single month saying we need to fund $50,000. We're running a $50,000 deficit.
Right.
We don't have the money to pay our workers and everything that goes into bringing the water up the hill through the 3 pumping stations and getting it up to the tanks and having it go through the treatment and then getting it to your homes. So those are our necessity. That is what we have to pay first. And to make that happen, we're lost by 50,000. So we bring in the 50,000, but even bringing in that 50,000 doesn't pay all the debts, because you see the sewer bill is still needing to be paid. You see Kern still needing to be paid. Those funds are not being paid because we still don't have enough money.
Right. We're running at a deficit operationally, and we're running at a deficit bill payingly.
Correct.
Which is terrible. So that's why things are so dire.
Correct.
Thank you, Matt. Number 5, this one's probably kind of boring, but I thought it might be interesting for those who are curious. What does it mean to be allocated water from the state? So on the right side of the screen, I have the latest notice to state water project contractors. That would be somebody like Kern County, from the state water project, or the Department of Water Resources, I'm sorry, stating exactly the allocation as it stands right now for 2021, which is 10%. They go on to provide a table of various allocation amounts for various purposes. I'll let you read that. It's also available on the California DWP website, which I've linked to at the end of the presentation. But effectively, State Water Project allocates a percentage of requested water from all state water contractors. That would be entities like KCWA. And the current allocation is set to 10%. It's down from 15%. We can only hope that it goes up if there's enough water available, surface water or reservoir water available later on in the year, but we all know that's probably kind of a long shot.
Start praying for rain.
Yeah, we should get some tomorrow. At 10%, again, we will receive 800 of our 8,000 allocated acre feet, and we still have to pay for the entire 8,000 for the year. So just keep that in mind. The last question's about water banking. I've heard this question a lot, and I had to do a little research on it myself. I'm still keeping it pretty high level, and I would appreciate any input from Matt or David on this. But basically, we have an agreement with Kern County to bank water in excess of the actual water that we pump up the hill. So if we only use 600 of our allotted 800 acre feet in 2021, then we would bank 200 acre feet back to KCWA, which is not a physical transaction. We're not actually moving the water. It's just banked with them for future use. This water is credited to us, and we can buy it back later. It's also something that we definitely rely on in a drought year where we might get a 0% allocation from the state. But even though it can be purchased back later, it's not purchased at face value. It's purchased at some exponentially higher number per acre feet. I don't even have any idea what that number is, but the water banking agreement is also included at the end of the presentation. So again, banking is not a physical transaction. We're not moving the water. It's simply noted on the account and credited. And please correct me if I'm wrong on that, David or Matt.
Yeah, that is correct.
All right. Lastly, I felt it pertinent to put a thank you in here. I know it's kind of a rough presentation, and I just hope everybody's hung on long enough and not fallen asleep yet. But we really do hope that you find this helpful. We really are taking transparency and disseminating information to you, the public, very seriously. I mean, we can't be more serious than we're being right now, in my opinion. And as Matt alluded to earlier, I just wanted to say we're, in the coming weeks and months, especially in March, there's going to be a lot more information. There will be more meetings, there'll be more documents, and there will be movement. We're not going to sit stagnant and just let things happen around here. We're taking charge of the situation. And just like you, like I said earlier, it almost gets me a little emotional to think about what would happen up here if we didn't have water. I mean, I can't even imagine having to leave my home for that. I don't even know what that would mean financially for me. It would be ridiculous. So we're working and very hard, tooth and nail, to get this situation rectified, like we alluded to earlier. I just hope that the community can come together and understand that we've been neglected for a great long time, and we're being called upon now to take care of this problem because the district simply doesn't have the money to continue to go along like this with no developer subsidy. It just does not. And it certainly doesn't make enough money from us, the ratepayers, to continue either in its current state. So I'd just like to wrap it up, say, we really appreciate your time. I know it's been a long presentation again, and I'll just show the final slide here, which has the references. It has my email address if you want to write that down or copy it down or send me an email right now just so that you have it. You can feel free to do that. It's Chris Blessing, WHWD@gmail.com. All of these documents that I've referenced in this presentation are linked from this presentation, and this presentation is a Google Slides presentation. I will publish it publicly. I'll publish it on the website as a PDF. And you'll be able to go through here, click all these links and download all these documents for yourself if you'd like. Otherwise, this is how we're going to continue to do it. We'll provide references. We're not going to be just throwing information at you all willy-nilly. It's going to always be documented and not subjective. It'll always be objective. That's a very important fact. So again, thank you very much. I will stop sharing my screen here, Matt, and hand the meeting back to you.
All right. Well, Chris, once again,